Frank joins us. He's the Nets studio host on Yes. He's also SiriusXM, NBA Radio, the starting lineup. He contributes to Around the Horn, and pardon the interruption. Let me start with a poll question. The team that's going to kick themselves the most after last night, the Jazz or the Sixers?
It's going to be the Sixers. They were up 26. The Jazz would be second, and I would put Milwaukee third on that list. So even though Milwaukee played, a Nets team that Harden was clearly not himself, it's still Kevin Durant. So you're losing to a guy having a tremendous performance, and we all know that he's capable of it. I mean, come on. If you're Utah, you're showing up for work in your own building, and Kawhi Leonard's not going to play. And then if you're Philadelphia, up 26, how about the way they played down the stretch of that game? I mean, the numbers are off the charts. Think about it, Dan. The fourth quarter of the last two games, Embiid is 1 for 10, and Tobias Harris is 0 for 5, and Ben Simmons has not attempted a shot in the fourth quarter of games 4 and 5. That's remarkable.
Do you have to take him off the floor now late in games?
I think you do. I think once the Hawks get to that fourth foul, I think you got to take him out. If I were Atlanta, I'm not going to intentionally foul to get to my fifth foul. But once I get 4, I don't care which quarter it's in, I'm going to foul him because you could tell it's clearly in his head and it's affecting the Sixers. And the fact that they're going to be on the road. Ben Simmons, I give him credit for this. At least he faced the music last night. He was in front of the media, and to the media's credit, they asked him a lot of questions about his shooting and specifically his free throw shooting. And he stood there and he answered all the questions. Embiid did not meet with the media, but Simmons has to do something. This is now becoming it's one thing for it to happen during the regular season, occasionally in the playoffs. Somebody had a great stat, Dan, that he's already missed more free throws in 10 playoff games, I think it's 45, than Steve Nash missed in his entire career in the playoffs. He missed 44. This guy's already missed 45 in the playoffs. It's hard to believe.
And I know Doc Rivers is trying to say the right thing about Ben Simmons, and he's a unique player, and he's a great player, but I can't you're not a superstar and a liability. You can't be both walking on the floor in the same game.
Yeah. I also think, Shaq struggled with free throws, but you never had the feeling that Shaq was nervous about going to the free throw line. And I think the same thing is true of Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's not a good free throw shooter. Giannis isn't worried in those moments. But when you're not taking a single shot in the fourth quarter of the last two games, when your team blew an 18-point lead and a 25-point lead or a 26-point lead, what does that tell you? To me, it's like I don't want to use the word afraid, but it seems like he's afraid to step up to the free throw line and take those shots. That has got to be a major concern. But you're right about Doc. Doc's doing the right thing. He's going to stand by his player. But this is up to Ben Simmons. He has to figure this out somehow.
All right. So do you have the Clippers figured out now? Because I don't. In the Dallas series, I didn't. Even in the bubble last year, I still didn't have them figured out. Now you don't have Kawhi. Woj says Kawhi's probably doubtful for games 6 and 7 if there is a 7. Yeah. But so now it's Paul George again, and then that supporting cast.
Yeah, I've been hearing it's a significant. They worry that it's a significant ACL injury. So who knows when we'll see Kawhi Leonard? I give Paul George a lot of credit. He gets mocked a lot, and he did not play well in the bubble. I don't like the things that he said about Doc Rivers, especially after Doc Rivers had gotten fired. But he's had a couple of big-time performances. Yeah. To go on the road, this was all about the Utah Jazz. They have to win that game. I have not had the Clippers figured out. I will say this. When Marcus Morris plays well, they seem to play well. He's a tough guy. He knocks down big-time shots. Utah completely fell apart last night. They're shooting in the second half. I think they were 3 for 24 on threes. I don't enjoy at times watching them play. When they're moving the ball around, they look good, but there are times when they're just settling for long, deep three-pointers, and it backfired on them big time in the second half.
Frank Isola, he covers the Nets, their studio host on Yes, and a contributor to Around the Horn. Pardon the interruption. Let's focus in on your Nets. What do you expect tonight?
I'll be interested to see how many minutes Kevin Durant plays in the first half. He went 48, obviously, in the last game. I think he's going to come out at some point in the first half of this game. If it's a 10-point game in the fourth quarter, does Steve Nash decide to maybe pull the plug at some point and say, you know what, let's just rest up for game 7? I do think that Harden will knock down a couple of shots. I give him credit for being out there for 46 minutes. He just didn't have it. He was never cutting to the basket. 8 of his 10 shots were threes, which told you he was just settling. I don't think you're going to get 49 points from Kevin Durant. I think you will get a big-time response from the Milwaukee Bucks. I expect them to win this game. I think we're going to get a game 7, which will be a great moment. I just think Durant playing 48 and James Harden playing 46, I think that's going to catch up to the Nets tonight.
I was yelling at the TV the last game because of what the Bucks did and did not do.
I know.
Like, you have Harden out there, you don't take advantage of him, make him run, make him guard somebody. The Greek Freak had chances. He had James Harden guarding him.
I know.
And he doesn't take it to the hoop. He doesn't want to get fouled. He doesn't want to go to the free throw line. I mean, that's a flawed logic here, during crunch time with one of the great players, a 2-time MVP. Crazy.
Yeah, and I thought the Nets did a great job of attacking Brook Lopez. They kept getting him in pick and rolls, and he could not guard, whether it was Jeff Green, whether it was Blake Griffin, or if Kevin Durant turned the corner, Kevin Durant kept beating him to the rim. So the Nets were attacking Brook Lopez, and meanwhile, the Bucks were not attacking James Harden. And you're so right. Late in that game, when the game, Durant had finally missed a shot, it was just under 2 minutes to go, and Giannis had the ball, and he's shooting a fadeaway jumper along the baseline. It's like, come on. I love the guy. He's a terrific guy. He's a self-made player. But some of the decisions that he makes late in games, it just drive you nuts. And I also thought a little thing, too, late in the game. When they were down 2, I'm talking about Milwaukee, with under 25 seconds to go, I'm going for the 3 there. Because I'm thinking, if we tie the game, Durant will probably hit a shot at the end of regulation anyway. And if we have to go 5 more minutes, Kevin Durant's going to end up with 60 points. Forget about 49 points. I would have gone for the 3. I get it. Chris Middleton made a good play driving into the lane, and then Giannis fumbled the ball. But you know what? Go for the win at that point, because at that point, you would have been lucky to get out of there with a victory.
And I've still, and I mentioned this yesterday, I've been watching the NBA for over 50 years. I don't understand how the best player on the floor doesn't face a double team to get the ball out of his hands. Not once did Milwaukee truly double team Durant to say, you're not beating us. If Green beats us or somebody else beats us, then that's fine. You're not beating us. I go back to when Jordan hit the shot against the Utah Jazz. I was watching it the other day. I'm yelling, and I know what the end result is. They didn't run anybody at Michael Jordan. I don't understand this logic, Frank.
I know. And if you go back to, I think we were probably at the game when Indiana played the Lakers. It was either game 3 or 4 in Indiana. And when Shaq fouled out, Kobe took over, and they had Larry Bird had Mark Jackson guarding Kobe, and they never ran a double team at him to get the ball out of his hands. It was so frustrating to watch from a Milwaukee Bucks standpoint. And also put Giannis on him at some point. You watch the NFL, they put the best cornerback on the best wide receiver, for crying out loud, to try to stop him. In the fourth, I get it. You don't want to get Giannis in foul trouble early in the game. I think in the fourth quarter, he either entered the fourth with 2 or 3 fouls. So he's not going to foul out at that point. You got to put him on Kevin Durant. Get the ball out of Durant's hands and make guys like Joe Harris, who couldn't make a shot, make him beat you. I get it. Jeff Green had probably the game of his life, but, it's a little bit different when you're taking those shots in a 1-2 point game as opposed to when your team is down 15 and you're wide open and shooting. I
just mentioned LeBron James had comments saying, hey, I told everybody that we were going to have all these injuries here. Do we have all these injuries or just injuries to marquee players? And Anthony Davis is not in shape. That's why he got hurt. Kawhi has been bothered by that knee for a long, long time. James Harden wasn't in shape this year. So when you had a sprained ankle by LeBron, doesn't have anything to do with your conditioning. Kyrie had a sprained ankle, nothing to do with your conditioning. So, LeBron, you kind of want it both ways. Hey, can you limit the regular season here? But they're not offering to give up 25% of their pay. So while I understand it was a quick turnaround, you had guys who weren't in shape to start the season, and these players aren't going to give any money back.
Yeah, and I think Kawhi was at 52, 53 games this season. So that was not a wear and tear situation. Same thing with Kyrie Irving. He was in the low 50s for games played. So the same thing with Embiid. Embiid played 51 games this season, then has the torn meniscus. So it's not like only Jokic played 72 games. Everyone else, was in the 50s or the 60s. And if you're LeBron, you're a big part of the union. You guys agreed to do it. To your point, they want it both ways. So you wanted to make all the money you could. And now, after all these guys are getting hurt, and there have been a ton of guys that have missed playoff games, you're saying, well, maybe we should have cut it back. To me, that's up to the NBA and the union. I think they blew it. I think they should have played a 60-game season. I think right now we should be in the NBA Finals. I think the season – I mean, Dan, we're not out of the second round yet. And think about where we are on the calendar. When I look up and I'm thinking, oh, man, I'm going to be working July 4th weekend, which I'm used to doing, covering free agency, not like being at games. It's going to be a little nutty.
Yeah, I mean, even throw in Embiid. He's never really been in shape.
Nope.
I mean, I give him credit. He's playing.
Playing well.
The meniscus tear, but a lot of these guys, Donovan Mitchell, that sprained ankle is still there. Like that's not conditioning. I think sprained ankle is just so that's why when I hear this with LeBron, do I want the NBA decided because of injuries? Who's the healthiest? No, but when KD went down. Or Magic got hurt in the finals against the Pistons. I mean, it happens. It's unfortunate. Klay Thompson goes down. You don't like it, but that's part of the game.
And I think, too, I think back in the day, the old school guys, if they had – it's one thing. Like Magic had the hamstring injury, couldn't play. And Harden obviously had to miss some games because of the hamstring injury. And Kyrie Irving obviously can't play now. But I do think there used to be – if guys were banged up a little bit, they just played and they didn't want you to know about it. Now, guys, they play hurt, and if they have a bad game, they make sure at their post-game press conference they ask you about it. I always say this about Patrick Ewing. Patrick had bad knees, obviously. If you ask Patrick Ewing about his injury or his knees, he would give you the death stare. You're like, no, don't go down that road talking about my body, how I'm banged up and I'm hurt. I think guys now can't wait to tell you, well, the reason I didn't play well is because I'm dealing with this situation. I think there's a little of that at play as well.
But you also, with gambling, don't we have to know this now? Now it's full disclosure that I need to know what's going on with, the fact that Tom Brady had knee surgery in the offseason and was not on the injury report due to his knee during the regular season. Like, that's not supposed to happen in this, world of gambling.
But I think a lot of it, too, is gamesmanship. They don't want you to know that. So the Nets, I thought it was gamesmanship with them when they announced that James Harden had been upgraded from out to questionable. I thought that was something they would just wanted to mess with the Milwaukee Bucks. But if you look at Harden's career, we're talking about guys that don't play. You look at his career numbers of games played. If he's healthy, he's out there. But you're 100% right. And I love Harden. I love the way he plays. He showed up out of shape in Houston. So forget about the forcing his way out. He was never in shape, and you have to think that probably impacted his hamstring somehow. But if he can, he'll be out there, and he showed that the other night with 46 minutes.
Have fun tonight, Frank. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dan. I'll see you guys.
Frank Isola, the Nets studio host on Yes and Sirius XM NBA Radio, the starting lineup, and he contributes to Around the Horn. And pardon the interruption.